Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Game Theory reaction. And this is, was FNAF's final mystery really that simple? So, given the last Game Theory FNAF thing I think that they watched or talked about was the crying child's full name on GT Live, I have a feeling that's what this video is going to be about. And I've seen some pushback to that, saying that, oh, Evan is a better name for the crying child than Dave. I mean, by the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. They're 4-letter guy names. I mean, besides the fact that Evan is 2 syllables and Dave is 1, I don't know. Seriously, I mean, I just like it that after all these years, we actually have found what is most likely the most plausible answer, and the fact that, oh, it's in a mirror and stuff in the mirror is backwards, and you know, all that little stuff that, well, I mean, it kind of boils down to the whole fact that, you know, with the way that, you know, lore has been hidden in this franchise for a while now, you know, people could potentially overthink things and overcomplicate answers. I mean, I kind of find it funny how potentially one of the longer standing mysteries in the franchise was at the end of the day just so simple to actually solve. But yeah, we should actually get into this probably, see if my predictions are right. So yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video, link to my film theory reaction, and yeah, we'll hold that out of the way. Let's get this thing started then, shall we?
After 9 years and countless theories, the crying child's name has been found. That's right, on screen right now is the real name of FNAF 4's crying child. And by the end of this episode, you're gonna know exactly which one it is. Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's just desperately trying to keep up with the FNAF content train. It feels like there's been a lot, right?
Yeah.
We had all that stuff from the 10th anniversary, we've had our first full entry into the Choose Your Own Adventure style book series, there's even a FNAF level in the new Funko Fusion game. I swear, if there is lore in this thing, I am going to scream. But
I completely forgot that Funko Fusion was a thing. And on top of that, what even is Funko Fusion? Because apart from like a couple of clips from the initial launch trailer, I have not looked up anything about this game, so I have no idea what it is. Is it like just like a 3D platformer collectathon where each level is based on a different thing that Funko Pops has made merch for? Is there some sort of story in it? Like, what is it?
But while I was busy just trying to keep on top of all of that, someone else decided that it would be fun to add one final slice to my already oversized mountain of lore pizza. Fellow theorist,
The Leaning Tower of Pizza.
and friend of the channel, Hyperdroid. Now, normally another theorist posting a theory of their own doesn't particularly slow me down. I'd normally finish writing what I'm doing and then I'd go back and watch that later. But this one was different because he claimed he'd done the impossible. He claimed that after years of speculation, he'd finally found the name of the crying child. That is a massive claim, especially
Very
when
much
so
so,
many
yeah.
others had tried and failed in the past. But
So many others, as in looks to past game theory.
it wasn't all talk. He backed it up with some pretty solid evidence that the fan base seemed to love. We were inundated with messages.
Again, I have seen some pushback saying they don't like the name Dave and actually prefer the name Evan, but you know, that might be just, you know, people being used to calling the crying child Evan. Plus, I like the whole thing about, you know, Dave being the crying child's real name, and then William using the name of his dead kid as like as a fake identity or something like that. I mean, I kind of like that.
On our subreddit, Twitter, YouTube comments, all asking us one thing: is he right? And I get it. Hyperdroid is a fantastic theorist, but this particular puzzle has eluded us for so long, to the point where most of us just thought it would never be solved. If he is right and we're all gonna start calling the crying child something other than the crying child, we wanna make sure it stands up to scrutiny. Don't wanna be caught backing the wrong animatronic horse. So let's go through the evidence he's presented, the methods he's used, and see whether this new name holds water. Ladies and gentlemen, it's can't use Morty anymore, can we? And
No.
doesn't look like Matt's gonna be interrupting me this time. Gotta come up with something new. Oh, I know.
Leave your theories in the comments below. I'll pick my favorite in the next episode of Trash.
Trash. Tom reviews a submitted hypothesis. Okay, yeah, that works.
Yeah, that's about right. I guess that's what happens when I let Yossi pick the acronym. Let's give a trash take then, shall we? To understand how Hyperdroid came to find this new name, we first need to recap where the mystery started. The survival logbook. After the release of FNAF 6, we got this book that seemed to just...
Actually, you know what, thinking about it, I mean, like, a lot of stuff is always talked about the survival logbook. Can you even still buy the thing? Like, it's been a long time since it was initially released. 2017, jeez. But yeah, you can still get them. Hardcover even. Wow.
Just be a kid's puzzle book, but it turned out to be one of the biggest lore clues in the entire series. And I really
it can be both.
Inside, we have 3 characters talking to us. Mike Afton writing in red pen, a ghostly spirit writing in faded text, and a final spirit altering the physical text of the book. Across several pages, the faded text wrote...
just thinking about it. I can't see out of 10, so on which side of the scale is being able to see and which one is being blind?
The words, my name. And on one page, my name was written on a gravestone. This reflected the 5th gravestone with no name that we found at the end of FNAF 6. Thanks to Reddit user DPowerful1, we realized that you could take the altered numbers on the pages where the words my name were found and use those as coordinates for the word search, giving us the name Cassidy, the 5th missing child. This in and of itself was a huge dub for the FNAF community, but
oh god, having Chica right,
because there was another puzzle in this book that remained unsolved, the Foxy Grid. This grid had faded letters in the first few boxes, showing us that we needed to fill in the rest, and likely meaning we needed more coordinates to figure out a new name. The name of the spirit writing in altered text in the book. Based on Cassidy's questions about the purple plastic telephone, psychic friend Fredbear, as well as a birthday party that was for you, all things seem to be pointing to this final spirit being FNAF 4's crying child. The Foxy Grid was going to finally help us figure out the name of this character. The problem was, nobody could solve it. Matt was literally ripping his hair out for years over this thing. Some people tried to find the name in other places and then reverse engineer a solution. In Help Wanted, the FNAF 4 bedroom was called Norman Bedroom, so maybe Norman? Some people thought Garrett because that's Mike's brother in the recent movie. Some even thought it might be Gregory because he's designed in a similar way to the crying child. But none of them were able to link it back to the Foxy Grid, and so it just felt inconclusive. A few Reddit users found the phrase "is Springtrap" using 6 Cassidy coordinates and 6 my name page numbers. This seemed to pair nicely with my name because it matched the FNAF 3 teaser. My name is Springtrap, and implied therefore that the ghostly text was actually Afton speaking to the crying child, who...
Oh geez, I don't remember anybody talking about that. Wow. Man, can you imagine how different the franchise would be if that was actually the case? Like, you have Afton Afton's like, oh, lost his physical form, I'm guessing because, you know, the Springtrap suit and animatronic has been broken, and now he's just haunting the book and haunting Michael. Ooh. Okay.
Whose name would therefore be Cassidy. But sadly, this solution ignores the 7th coordinate needed to make up the name Cassidy in the first place. And so by cherry-picking 6 of the coordinates, it kind of causes the whole thing to fall apart. Finally, the most simple and well-known of the theories was offered by Reddit user Wolfie1740 Kingdom. They matched the questions that Cassidy was asking to the answers given by the crying child in altered text. The party was for you. It was for me. What do you see? I can't see. Does he still talk to you? I can hear sounds. This gave them the letters E, V, and A, but they weren't really able to figure out the final letter. Another Reddit user, Godzilla813105, did manage to find a solution. They added up the tally marks to give them the final coordinates 39, leading to the letter N and the name Evan. A lot of people really liked this name and thought it was an interesting theory, but because you had to break the method on that final letter, it was just
never
too
quite
tough
worked.
a moondrop to swallow. Enter Hyperdroid. He too liked the initial method posed by Wolfie, but he agreed that the final letter would need to follow the same method, especially as Crying Child does offer a 4th answer, I'm scared. So he took the same 3 answers to get the letters E, V, and A, but rather than skipping the 4th answer, he tried to match it to another one of the questions. On page 41, Cassidy asks, do you have dreams? Initially, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense given the response, response. But underneath that question, Mike has
Is a
drawn
nightmare,
picture of
yeah,
Nightmare.
animatronic.
The nightmare animatronics came from William's experiments on his kids, and it's been theorized that this is what was used to make the crying child scared of the animatronics in FNAF 4. That means the crying child would not only know what this is, but would also be afraid of it, leading to him giving the seemingly non-direct answer, "I'm scared." Taking the page number for that question, you can plug it into the Foxy grid and get the letter D. Spelling Evad. Then, noticing all the references the book had to reflecting, along with the random mirror next to the word search that's never been used for anything, Hyperdroid reflected the answer, giving them the crying child's name. D-A-V-E. Dave. Everybody lost their frontal lobes over this. But Hyperdroid wasn't done. Not only did he offer the initial solution, he also went classic game theory on all of us and used some real-world evidence. He calls out that Dave, or more accurately the full name David, was the 3rd to 5th most popular baby name for boys between 1970 and 1980, around the time that he would have been born. I love the fact he did this.
Very much so,
Real-world
yeah.
evidence is so useful for theory crafting. It can give you insight into things that the games or books might otherwise not. And given how important this name is, I wouldn't be surprised if Scott had actually done some real-world research himself into the name. And what's more, I think we can actually expand upon Hyperdroid's idea here by getting a little more specific. So let's give it a go. FNAF is commonly depicted as taking place in Hurricane, Utah. According to the United States Social Security Administration, between 1970 and 1980, David switched positions a few times, occupying either the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, or the 1st most popular spots, higher than
so
what
there's a
Hyperdroid
lot of
presented.
Davids.
So we're off to a pretty good start. Although there is one detail about the Aftons that we never really talk about that could change all of this.
Oh god, right, I completely forgot. They're from Britain! I mean, from sister location. We have voice lines from both Michael and William, who they both speak with British accents. And of course, you know, Elizabeth and Dave, being the younger kids, most likely were born in America, so they don't speak with as much of or an English accent at all, as opposed to their parents and older brother. Right. So what does it? So then the question begs: how does David stack up in the popularity charts as, you know, in England at the time, given that, you know, William and his wife were most likely from there, though even though Dave wasn't actually born there, but, you know, parents being parents, you know, that sort of thing.
Ludwig actually mentioned it when he binged all of the FNAF lore with Matt on stream.
Matt, why are they all British? Why are they British? The kids are raised in, like,
probably
Utah, and they sound British.
When the Aftons speak, they sound British. Like,
No,
somewhere
yeah,
from
Elizabeth
England
does
based
have
on
a
the
British
accents.
accent.
I'd like to say it's nice to have some British representation in video games, but I'm not really sure this is the one I'd want to claim. Anyway.
Yeah, never mind. Forget what I said before. I completely forgot that, you know, you hear Elizabeth talking as well, and she speaks with a British accent. I was thinking of Baby's voice.
Right, this detail could throw a spanner into the works, as there's a chance that William named his kids based on what was popular back home, rather than where they lived now. So, was David still a popular name in the UK? Thankfully, the answer is abso-freaking-lutely. More so than in America, actually. According to the Office of National Statistics, David was the most popular name for boys in England from 1954 to 1974. After that, between 1974 and 1994, it only dropped down to number 3. So still, this is looking like a pretty solid piece of evidence right now. Plus, we can actually take it a step
there you
further.
go.
Wanna guess what other name was in the top 10 baby boy names during the 70s?
Michael.
In the UK, Michael was the 9th most popular name for a boy, and in Utah, it was literally the number 1 name every year in the 70s, except 1973, where it was overtaken by Jason. Of course, Jason had to ruin the perfect streak. Hashtag blame Jason, am I right? Regardless, again, this seems...
Does Jason... you know, that's the thing. I used to remember... I only ever heard of Jason as, you know, being the guy that worked on GT Live near the beginning. Does he still work for them? I completely forget.
to be lining up pretty well. But what about the final Afton child?
Elizabeth.
Well, Well, she is also on these lists, although she's nowhere near as popular. In the UK for that time, she was sitting between 20th and 25th most popular name. And in Utah, it's similar, anywhere between 19th to 24th. That's not really as high as I'd like for it to feel like a solid connection. It isn't super bad. It would be way worse if the names were like 50th or 100th most popular, you know? But if...
I mean, but at the same time, it really doesn't matter for her, given that, you know, we have much more solid evidence about her name.
This is being used as evidence for how Scott picked his names, then Elizabeth would likely need to follow that same pattern, and in reality, she'd have then ended up being called something like Sarah or Jennifer, both #1 names for the time period in the UK and Utah respectively. Therefore, while David was a really popular name between the 1970s and 80s, it kind of feels like a weaker connection. Maybe Scott just thought Elizabeth sounded more British because that was the Queen at the time. Who knows? No need to worry though, because that wasn't the only real-world evidence Hyperdroid used. He also mentioned the meaning of the name David. While it was a popular name in both the UK and the US, it's actually of Hebrew origin, meaning beloved. Fun fact, Thomas also comes from a Hebrew word that means twin. I'm not a twin, at least as far as I know. Maybe you could let me know down in the comments if you think you found my long-lost twin. For this theory though, Hyperdroid claims that the meaning does make sense. He connects the meaning of beloved to the crying child's brother Mike, and how his whole character arc is caused by killing his brother, showing us that his brother Dave was beloved by him. This is where I have to press X to doubt. While, yes, Michael does say sorry to his brother by the end of FNAF 4, the rest of his actions don't really say that he considered his brother beloved. He jump scares him, he actively puts him into an animatronic, he doesn't seem to care about him at all. After that, his actions seem to be spurred on more by his father. Afton sent him down into Sister Location, where he then learnt about Elizabeth and the monster his father was, and so went on a quest to destroy him.
So, I mean, by that logic, you could say that he was beloved by his father. I mean, granted, we don't know for sure what specific sociopath William was, but I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of his actions seem to have gotten worse after his kids died, so you have to think that there is some level of grief that was kind of, if not fueling, at least amplifying a lot of his more bloodthirsty tendencies.
Some of that may have come from the guilt of killing his brother, but I'm just not convinced enough to say that Michael considered his brother beloved. Now, that doesn't mean that I think the meaning David being beloved is invalid evidence at all. He may not have been beloved by Michael, but he was beloved by someone else, William.
Exactly, yeah, literally what I just said.
He didn't want him to die. He needed to save him. I will put you back together. We've also believed for a long while that he killed Charlie in a drunken or emotional rage after the death of his own son. That wouldn't happen if he didn't care about his kid, if his son wasn't beloved. And by associating that meaning with Afton, other pieces fall into place for the other Afton kids as well. Yeah. Michael once again comes from the Hebrew language, and it means who is like God. Typically, this is meant as a rhetorical question because there is no one like God, but it could also be interpreted as a statement. Michael, who is like God. William is a man who has figured out power over life and death in this world. He sees himself as a god. And Mike tells us himself that the Funtime animatronics confuse him for his father.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they
I didn't think of that.
He is like his father. He is who is like God. The same thing goes for the name Elizabeth. It's derived from the Hebrew name Elisheva and means, my God is a promise. One of the only lines we get from Elizabeth before she becomes baby is her begging William to let her play with baby.
Oh, Daddy, let me go to her. Didn't you make her just for me?
Baby was made by Afton for Elizabeth.
Yeah, okay, now I just thought of something. So, assuming that we're still, going with the theory that Gregory is like a robotic duplicate of the crying child, Dave, why doesn't he have an English accent? Why does he just speak with like with an American accent? Is that just so he blends in better with, your average American child? Potentially. We still, if he is a robot, which, I'm still on the fence about personally. It could be. Or you never know. Maybe he'll at some point he'll develop a split personality, and one half will be American, one half will be British. Who knows?
She's annoyed because she is now being denied the thing made specifically for her, the thing that was promised to her by her father.
Also, just now thinking about it, you'd think that William, after building the literal murder machines that were the Funtime animatronics, he would have possibly put in safeguards to say, oh yeah, do all your murdery stuff except if it's if it's my daughter Elizabeth, you know, because they're able to detect, oh, there's only 2 kids, 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, you know, that sort of stuff. They're able to detect people in the room. So you wouldn't be able to like put in at least some rudimentary form of like facial recognition software to make sure that it doesn't go after his own family?
By the god of this world. After that, she disobeyed and got scooped. And so Afton made her another promise, the same one he made the crying child. He sent Michael down into the bunker to put her back together. 3 Afton kids, 3 Hebrew names, 3 meanings that all point back towards dear old dad. It's like poetry.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Interestingly,
Oh, no.
William isn't of Hebrew origin, it's actually Germanic, but it also has an interesting meaning. Resolute protector or strong-willed warrior. He tried to protect Elizabeth. He was resolute in fixing and protecting the crying child after he died. And if you
Yeah,
don't call surviving a
definitely.
spring-locking strong-willed, I don't know what else you'd call it.
Definitely,
so
yeah.
from a thematic standpoint, the
Well, I
name
mean,
Dave
survived,
does
quote-unquote.
seem to work. Its meaning fits what we know of the character, and it ties into the same themes as the rest of the Afton family. It's at this point, though, I should probably address the Orville in the room. Real-world research is great, and strong connecting themes are fantastic pieces of supplementary evidence. But that's the point. They're supplementary. If the core evidence isn't there to back it up in the first place, then it don't mean squat. It all comes down to the
What's in the
actual
security
method
logbook,
a Hyperdroid used to solve this puzzle. And I'll be honest, when I first saw it, I was a little unsure. Using the faded text of "the party was for you and what do you see" make complete sense for the answers "it was for me and I can't see." I Can Hear Sounds technically works with "does he still talk to you?" though it's not the cleanest, but I'm scared being a response to "do you have dreams?" does feel like a bit of a stretch. The line only works because of the nightmare drawing on the same page, even though none of the other questions need context clues from the page. This feeling was also exacerbated when Hyperdroid pointed back to a Reddit post by the user Ecstatic Marzipan7 from the GT subreddit. They came up with a solution 3 years ago, so way to represent the GT community. But when I took a look at the original post, they were receiving similar pushback. People were commenting the same things that I'm saying now. However, we theorists are nothing if not thorough. We always dot our I's and cross our T's. Rather than just say, this answer feels wrong and throwing the whole thing out, I wanted to go back through the logbook and do a bit of my own reverse engineering. I marked down every page number where Cassidy wrote something in the logbook. I then used those page numbers in the Foxy grid to find all the possible letters we could get to see if any usable answers that we could then go back and pair with "I'm scared." 2 of them got ruled out immediately. What do you remember and do you miss them? Because they're on pages 20 and 70. You can't go 0 down on a grid, so they're out. On page 56 we get "what's your favorite ride the carousel?" but that spells Vave, so that's out too. 3 of Cassidy's questions.
I mean, you never know. I mean, if we ignore the mirror for a second, that could be Avab. Which, I mean, isn't the name either, but it sounds funny.
Do give us letters that technically work. "Do you remember your name?" is on page 31. "Do any of these toys look familiar to you?" is on page 42. And "did one of these belong to you?" is on page 43. 31 gives us a C, 42 gives us a W, and 43 gives us a P. Using these letters, you can spell
Wave.
wave, and pave. All real words, but not exactly names.
I mean, if one of those actually was the crying child's actual name, I would start to feel that rage that I feel for like kids who have really stupid names, and I'd want to just smack William so hard.
numbers, especially considering the very normal Mike and Elizabeth. Although, page 43 isn't actually labeled as 43. It's one of the altered page numbers, and it shows 15. So I tried that too, and it gave me Yave, another dud. The only time I got close to another answer was by using page 23, which ironically gives you an N spelling Evan. Was Wolfie actually right all those years ago? Yeah, no. If you thought Do You Have Dreams made no sense with I'm Scared, I feel like Was Your Favorite Childhood Toy a Plastic Telephone is an even worse answer.
I mean, unless the crying child has, a fear of telephones. Actually, what is that? Really? Telephone phobia? I mean, you have all these phobias with such weird and creative names, but telephone phobia? Really?
It would then mean we haven't reversed anything either, and so the mirror in the middle of the book would also remain unused, which...
Or, potentially, that could mean that William was in fact a time-traveling, noble from medieval times, and he named one of his sons Knave. That's extremely stupid, I'm sorry.
Which isn't really ideal. The last page to try was 83, where Cassidy asks, is this song familiar to you? This gives you a T in the Foxy grid, and I tried using this as both an alternative for I'm Scared as well as I Can Hear Sounds, just to be sure, but no combination of those letters made an A either, which means, by process of elimination, Do You Have Dreams does kinda have to be the answer. If it's not, we'd also have to throw out the letters E, V, and A too, because we need to find an entirely new method to solve this grid. And at this point, I kind of feel like if there was another method, someone surely would have found it by now. I'm sure that some people still aren't going to be happy with this solution.
There aren't, I know.
For other questions, Crying Child was just responding to the words Cassidy said. But for this final one, you have to use Mike's drawing to get the full interpretation. As I've already said, that kind of breaks the method. Not as much as finding the N for Evan using the tally marks did, but enough that it doesn't feel satisfying. Except when you stop and look back, Scott actually did the same thing with the Cassidy puzzle. Think about it. At the start, we were using altered page numbers from pages with my name written on them. But as the puzzle went on, that changed. Suddenly, we stopped using altered page numbers and began using other altered numbers from the page, like 7 and 2 or 10 and 11. On some pages, we're not even using altered numbers. One of them, we use numbers written by Mike, a completely different character. And on another, you have to follow Mike's clue to a different page and then use the numbers that are just in the book. They're not altered, they're not written down, they're just there. We were still following the my name part of the puzzle, but the actual number used for the coordinates was different. That rule was being broken. And yet, no one really batted an eyelid when that was pitched out. Why? Because we got an answer that made sense. Yes, the method was a little messy, but clearly it was the correct solution that Scott had planned.
And also, in the matter of both of them, the final part of the puzzle required Mike's input to complete. Huh. Okay.
He then went on to confirm the name Cassidy in his cancelled movie ideas. To me, this is the same situation. We finally have an answer that spells a name and follows the same kind of puzzles, even if the method is a little messy. Maybe Scott wanted to make the puzzles harder as they went on. Or, maybe he just isn't that good at planning puzzles to begin with. We theorists are so used to complex ciphers and ARGs that sometimes I think we expect everything we solve to be on that level.
What was I saying at the beginning of this? Or the Theorizing community, or I specified the FNAF community at the time, but same thing. But they're so used to these puzzles that are multifaceted, requiring different ciphers to decode things, that as soon as you give a simple answer, everybody starts losing their mind. Because they've obviously never heard of Occam's razor.
But in actuality, not everyone is. And so the simplest solutions can actually be the best. All that being said, what do I actually think? Is Dave the real name of the crying child? Well, even though a little messy, the solution does fit. It gives an answer for the random mirror in the middle of the book, and it works thematically with all of the Afton children and their parts in the story. Is Crying Child's name Dave? For me, after spending days going back and forth, looking at every side of the argument, I have to say that the answer is a resounding yes. I believe that Dave is the name of the crying child. So to Hyperdroid, Ecstatic Marzipan 7, and any other FNAF theorist that came up with this solution over the years, congrats congratulations, you did it. You solved the Foxy grid, and you got the theorist seal of approval. Editor,
Wonderful.
cue the applause. So nice to give one of these out, especially to people like Ecstatic Marzipan 7 who solved this thing over 3 years ago. It's a helpful reminder that there are some fantastic theorists out there. We just need to be open to hearing them out. Whether they're a tiny channel here on YouTube, a small post on a subreddit with only 2 upvotes, or a random reply on a Discord server, they can have ideas that are just as good as any one of us bigger channels. It may go against our own personal headcanons, but if this experience has taught us anything, it's not to discount those ideas just because they're a little out there.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if your headcanon is smashed apart just because, you know, a name of one character is different, I mean, your headcanon wasn't that stable to begin with.
Give them a chance. Who knows? They might actually have the solutions we've all been looking for. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Oh god, absolutely wonderful. I hope this settles most of the debates, because, I mean, with how big game theory and the other theorist channels are, I mean, it's just kind of at the point that they sort of become like the final arbiters of like, oh, this theory is correct, this theory is not correct. You know, just because of like the manpower and the time they can put into stuff like this. And while I was watching this, I had a bit of a thought. So if you look at my channel, you'll see that I do a lot of reactions to like Deltarune theories. One, because, you know, I like watching that kind of stuff, and 2, you know, it does well, so win-win. But into a reaction I did a little while ago, where it was talking about like the importance of names, of like character names in like Deltarune and Undertale. I started talking about how like theorizing and fanfiction were on opposite sides of the same spectrum. At the end of the day, you're just like making stuff up, and theorizing is just fan fiction with under the guise of like a lab coat and goggles, because, you know, you're using actual experimentation and, you know, stuff like that. But the longer, like, say, a franchise that has a theorizing community goes without new installments, new info, the more theorizing starts to slide over to the fan fiction side of things, just because, in my own words, they start running on fumes. They start running out of like new solid concrete things that they can like actually analyze and try to figure out, oh, this connects to this, and this, and then they start going off in weird directions as everybody starts going stir crazy, essentially. Thinking about it, I've noticed that FNAF has never really deviated into that territory, at least not in my perspective. And I'm thinking, like, in the early days of FNAF, you know, I mean, when you'd have, you know, multiple games within the span of a year, yeah, no problems there. But then, on top of that, there have been books coming out, the spin-off games, you know, the little bits of stuff that, like, Scott throws up. And then, I'm thinking about it, you also have stuff where you can kind of get a sort of like a cycle of rebirth happening also, where you have people like where you have people like this, where they go back to previous mysteries that were seemingly solved, but then they breathe new life into them, essentially throwing fresh fuel on a fire that already burned through that theorizing and starting it anew again. I haven't, thinking back to, granted, the limited amount of time I've spent in the Undertale and Deltarune theorizing space as an observer, I can't say I've seen much of that going on. Now, granted, I mean, you of course get the whole thing of like, oh, this person made a theory, it gets really popular, and then you have somebody else kind of like debunking that theory, but it's never been something like, oh, something from like chapter 1 several years ago was kind of overlooked and somebody makes a theory about it, and then that kind of like brings everything back to life as people like re-look at all of the stuff in chapter 1, saying how does this connect to that, and you all that little thing. It really is fascinating, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, that's gonna be it for now. So yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason, corner video linked to my film theory reaction, and yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.